A man is standing in his neighbor's living room, watching security camera footage of himself on the television screen. He doesn't know what the camera caught. The footage shows a grainy figure backing a truck into a garage at 5:18 in the morning, loading something heavy, driving away. Now the police officer in the room is asking questions, and the man, the same man on the screen, can't stop talking. Tools, he says. Just some tools for work. A lunchbox. But nobody asked him what he was loading. His hands go to the top of his head. He sways. He looks toward the door like he wants to leave. The neighbor, once the man is gone, will tell the officer quietly, "I just don't understand why he keeps explaining himself over and over." The man on the screen and the man in the room are the same person. And somewhere 40 miles east, in a stretch of barren oil field, his wife and 2 daughters are already gone. His name is Chris Watts. In a few hours, he'll be on television, looking into a camera with dry eyes, asking the public to help bring his family home. Shanann Watts was the kind of person who documented everything. Her Facebook was a highlight reel of motherhood played at full volume. Birthday parties, matching outfits, the girls covered in spaghetti sauce, grinning. She filmed herself surprising Chris with the news of her 3rd pregnancy. In the video, she wears a shirt that reads, "Oops, we did it again." Chris looks at the positive test and says flatly, "That's awesome." Remember that reaction. It matters later. She was 34, 15 weeks pregnant with a boy they'd already named Nico. She had lupus, and getting pregnant again had been a calculated risk, one she'd made because she believed in the family she was building. She sold nutritional supplements for a multi-level marketing company called Lavelle. Chris worked as an operator for Anadarko Petroleum. On paper, they were the suburban dream. In reality, they'd filed for bankruptcy 3 years earlier with nearly $450,000 in debt. Her friends would later tell investigators that Shanann wasn't performing happiness. She was fighting for it. That summer, she took the girls to North Carolina for 5 weeks to visit family. Chris stayed behind in Colorado, alone in the house, alone with his phone. And within days of Shanann leaving, he was sleeping with someone else. Nicole Kessinger worked in Anadarko's environmental department. She was 30. Chris told her the marriage was over, that he was finalizing the divorce, just working out financial details. They became physical almost immediately, 3 or 4 times a day, by her own account. He Googled when to say "I love you" for the first time in a new relationship. He told her he loved her. She said it back. 1,000 miles away, Shanann could feel the distance widening but couldn't name the cause. Her texts to Chris from North Carolina read like someone reaching across a gap that keeps growing wider with every message. She told him she missed the smell of him. She told him she missed him touching her when she cooked. He responded with one-word answers, or not at all. She texted a friend, "He has changed, I don't know who he is." When Chris flew out to North Carolina for the last week of the trip, the reunion confirmed everything she feared. He barely touched her, wouldn't hug her. She practically had to ask for a kiss at the airport. She wrote to him afterward, "I don't know how you fell out of love with me in 5.5 weeks, or if this has been going on for a long time, but you don't plan another baby if you're not in love." They flew back to Colorado on August 7th. The next day, Shanann cancelled the gender reveal party they'd planned for August 19th. A friend texted asking if everything was okay. Shanann responded, "Chris said we are not compatible anymore." Then, "He refused to hug me, said he thought another baby would fix his feelings, said he refused couples counseling." While Chris was pulling away, Shanann was doing the opposite, buying self-help books, researching couples counselors, drafting a letter to him about their marriage, pouring out everything she felt and everything she wanted to save. She told a friend she'd considered whether Chris might be having an affair, but didn't think he had the game to pull it off. She was wrong about that. She was right about everything else. On Sunday, August 12th, Shanann left for a business trip to Scottsdale, Arizona. Short, just overnight. Her friends at the event noticed she wasn't herself. Her mind was on her marriage, on the man waiting at home who no longer seemed to want her there. That evening, her flight was delayed by a storm. She had a final dinner with her closest friends from Lavelle, seeking advice, seeking comfort. That was the last meal she would eat with people who loved her. That same Sunday evening, Chris texted a co-worker about the next morning's schedule at the oil site. He volunteered to go alone. "I can go out there, though," he wrote. "No sense in both of us going out there, LOL." Think about that for a second. He's texting LOL while arranging access to the location where, 12 hours later, he'll dispose of his family's bodies. Shanann's friend, Nicole Atkinson, drove her home from the airport. Her neighbor's security camera, the same one that would become the most important piece of evidence in the case, captured Shanann walking through the front door at 1:48 a.m. on Monday, August 13th. She was home. Chris was inside with the girls. What happened between 1:48 a.m. and 5:18 a.m. comes from one source, Chris Watts himself, in a prison confession given months later. His accounts changed multiple times. He lied, then confessed, then lied inside the confession. But the version investigators believe is closest to the truth is this. He straddled Shanann on the bed, told her the marriage was over. She confronted him. She knew there was someone else. He denied the affair. She told him he would never see the kids again. He put both hands around her neck. 2 to 4 minutes. That's how long it takes. At his sentencing, when the prosecutor stated that number, Chris told investigators he thought, "Why couldn't I just let go?" Their 4-year-old Bella walked into the bedroom holding her blanket. She asked what was wrong with Mommy. He told her Mommy didn't feel well. He wrapped Shanann in the fitted sheet from their bed and dragged her down the stairs. He lost his grip. Her body slid. Bella stood at the top, watching, crying. He loaded Shanann onto the floorboard of his truck's back seat. Celeste, 3 years old, woke up. He put both girls on the bench seat, directly above their mother's body. Each child had a blanket. Celeste held a stuffed animal. He drove 45 minutes east to the oil site, flat, treeless land under a black sky. The girls were alive for the entire drive. They saw him pull their mother from the truck. They asked, "What are you doing to Mommy?" He doesn't remember what he told them. I want to pause here, because this is the part of the story that is hardest to sit with. Not the act itself, we'll get to that. It's the 45-minute drive. 2 small children in the back seat of a truck in the dark, sitting above their dead mother, asking their father questions he can't answer. 45 minutes of that. 3/4 of an hour where anything could have been different. At the site, he used Celeste's own blanket, a blue Yankees blanket she carried everywhere, and ended her life in the back seat. Bella sat next to her sister, silent. He dropped Celeste's body into a crude oil storage tank. The hatch at the top was 8 inches in diameter, 8 inches, barely wider than a dinner plate. He forced his 3-year-old daughter's body through that opening. When he came back to the truck, Bella was still sitting there. She looked at him. And in a soft voice, she asked whether the same thing was going to happen to her that happened to Cece. She fought back. She was 4 years old, and she fought. Her last words were 2 syllables that Chris Watts says he hears every night in his cell when he closes his eyes. He put her in the second tank. He buried Shanann in a shallow grave nearby, face down. Then he drove to work. By 6:30 a.m., he was texting his co-worker about the day's schedule. He texted Nicole Kessinger. He called a realtor about selling the house. He contacted the girls' school to say they wouldn't be enrolling that fall. 4 phone calls, 4 acts of erasure, like crossing names off a list. Meanwhile, Shanann's phone had been silent for hours. No texts returned, no calls answered. She'd missed a doctor's appointment, the one where she was supposed to hear the baby's heartbeat for the first time. Nicole Atkinson knew. Not what had happened, not the specifics, but the wrongness of it. She knew Shanann's rhythms the way you know the rhythms of anyone you see every day. Shanann never went anywhere without her phone, never left the house without her lupus medication, never, ever went silent without explanation. When Nicole couldn't reach her by mid-morning, she called Chris. He wasn't panicked, wasn't even concerned. He told her Shanann had gone on a playdate with the girls. Which friend? He couldn't say. Nicole called again. He told her they were separating. Nicole told him that wasn't her concern right now. Her concern was that her pregnant friend had vanished. She used the word receptive later to describe what Chris wasn't being, as if the disappearance of his own family was a minor inconvenience someone was asking him to attend to. Nicole drove to the house. She found Shanann's car in the garage, car seat still inside, purse on the counter, phone wedged between the couch cushions, wedding ring sitting on the nightstand, the same ring Chris had slid off Shanann's finger and left there deliberately to make it look like she'd chosen to leave. The children's beds unmade, the master bed stripped, sheets balled in the corner. Nicole called the police, And here is where the lie began to collapse. Frederick police officer Scott Coonrod arrived with a body camera running. Chris met him at the door. He was calm, strangely, impossibly calm. He let the officer search the house. He explained things no one asked about. When they found Shanann's wedding ring, he picked it up and held it between his thumb and forefinger, at arm's length, like it was something that might burn him. Then they went to the neighbor's house. Nathaniel Trinastish had pulled up his security footage. And this is the moment you can watch a man realize he's caught. Chris saw himself on screen, loading the truck in the dark, and his body came apart. He paced, hands on his head, swaying. He talked over the footage, narrating every frame before anyone could ask about it. He reached for his phone and held it against his chest like a shield. The neighbor told police afterward that the feeling in the room was eerie. Nicole said the same thing in her own words. That's when my mind went bad, really bad. What would he be loading up at 5:18 in the morning? And the footage revealed something else, something definitive. No one had left the house that day except Chris, not Shanann, not the girls. The only activity the camera captured was one man, alone, before dawn. The officer told Chris this. His response was a single word: okay. The next day, August 14th, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation issued an endangered missing alert. Search teams mobilized. Shanann's face appeared on the news across Colorado, and Chris Watts did something that still, years later, makes investigators shake their heads. He agreed to go on television. He stood on the porch of the house where, 36 hours earlier, he'd strangled his wife. A reporter asked what he wanted to say. He looked into the lens. His eyes were dry, his voice flat and rehearsed, and he said his kids were his life. He said their smiles lit up his world. He said he just wanted them back. Analysts would later freeze-frame his face during that interview. When he said, "I just want them back," the corners of his mouth lifted, not in grief, but in something closer to a duper's delight, the involuntary satisfaction of someone who believes they're getting away with it. His head shook no, while his words said yes. His eyes closed when he mentioned his daughters by name, a blocking behavior, the body's refusal to see what the mind already knows. The police watching that broadcast already had their doubts, and they were about to confirm them. The FBI and CBI joined the case. Detectives discovered the affair with Nicole Kessinger within days. And Kessinger, after watching Chris on television begging for the return of a family she'd been told he was divorcing, called the police herself. She turned over everything. The relationship timeline, the lies he'd fed her, the texts, the calls, all of it. She cooperated fully. On August 15th, 2 days after the murders, investigators brought Chris in for a polygraph. He failed. The examiner told him the results showed deception. Then FBI agent Graham Coder and CBI agent Tammy Lee sat him down, and they didn't do what Chris expected. They didn't confront him. They didn't accuse. Agent Lee told Chris she could see he wasn't a monster. She told him there must have been a reason. She told him she believed something had happened, and he needed to get ahead of the story. She was patient. She was strategic. And she was relentless. Chris broke, but only partway. He confessed to killing Shanann. Then he built another lie on top of the first one. He claimed Shanann had smothered the girls, and he'd strangled her in a fit of grief and rage after catching her in the act. It was a story engineered to make him something less than what he was. Not a man who murdered his entire family, a father who snapped. Investigators didn't buy it. The autopsy evidence wouldn't support it, but it was enough to arrest him. On August 16th, they drove to the oil site. Chris had marked the locations on a photograph. They found Shanann first, face down in a shallow grave, wrapped in the fitted sheet from her bed. Near the grave, the sheet from the girl's bed. Then the tanks, Bella in one, Celeste in the other, both submerged in crude oil. The openings of those tanks, 8 inches. That number became the fact no one who worked the case could forget. Not because of the physics of it, but because of what it required. The deliberateness, the sustained effort, the choice to continue. This was not a crime of passion. This was logistics. On November 6th, Chris pleaded guilty to all 9 charges. 5 counts of first-degree murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. The death penalty came off the table. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Marcello Kopkow called it perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime he had handled out of thousands of cases. Then Shanann's father, Frank Zuchek stood up. He told Chris that he had been given the best gift anyone could receive, a daughter, and he had taken that gift and destroyed it. Frank's voice broke. Chris stared at the table. 5 life sentences without parole, 84 additional years. But the case didn't end there, because Chris still hadn't told the truth about his children. In February 2019, investigators flew to Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, where Chris had been transferred for his own safety. Inmates in Colorado had been shouting suggestions about how he should end his life. They sat down with him and said his situation was unique. They said they wanted to understand. Over 5 hours for the first time, he admitted that he had killed Bella and Celeste, not Shannon, him. He described the entire sequence: the bedroom, the stairs, the drive, the oil site, the blanket, and something else. Something he said he would never have admitted in August. Something that would only surface years later in letters to a pen pal. He had planned it. Not in the moment, not in a rage, but over weeks. He had given Shanann oxycodone during her pregnancy, hoping to terminate it. Hoping that without the baby, it would be easier to leave and start a new life with Nicole Kessinger. When that didn't work, he chose the only exit his mind could construct. Remember the pregnancy video. Remember Shanann's joy. Remember his flat. That's awesome. He was already calculating, already somewhere else. That moment wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the end performing as a beginning. Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were buried on September 1st, 2018, at Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Pinehurst, North Carolina. Hundreds of people filled the pews. Thousands more watched on a Facebook live stream. Chris Watt's name was never spoken. In the months and years that followed, Shanann's parents begged the public to stop harassing their family online. Strangers had been picking apart Shanann's personality, her social media posts, her marriage, as if a wife's flaws could explain a husband's murders. Nicole Kessinger changed her name and vanished. The house on Saratoga Trail still stands, though for a time after the killings, people left stuffed animals on the lawn until the Homeowners Association asked them to stop. Stuffed animals, for children who collected stuffed animals, who rode to their deaths clutching them. Chris Watts sits in a cell in Wisconsin. He has photos of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste on the wall. He says he talks to them every morning and reads to his daughters every night. Women write him love letters. He writes back. There is no redemption in that cell, no arc, no transformation. Just a man performing fatherhood for an audience of no one in a room where the lights are controlled by someone else. Every piece of evidence in this case is public. The body camera footage, the text messages, the 5-hour confession, the neighbor's security tape. Shanann's Facebook posts, every one of them, frozen in time, still showing a woman building a life that no longer exists. You can watch all of it. You can watch Chris Watts stand on his porch hours after killing his family and ask America to help find them. You can watch his hands tremble and his eyes stay dry. You can watch the officer standing just off camera, quiet, patient, already knowing, just waiting for him to stop pretending. Shanann was 34, Bella was 4, Celeste was 3. Nico never drew a breath. The garage door Chris used that morning, the one Shanann always told him not to open before dawn because the sound carried straight up into the girl's bedroom, is still there. It still opens onto the same driveway, in a subdivision where every house looks the same. Bella's room was directly above it. She would have heard it open.